you have the word.
Okay, so thank you very much. Well, I'm going to try to be very quick because we're 7 and I could be talking about this for 7 hours. So I will try to do it in just 10 minutes. So very quickly, as Mathieu has said, and thank you very much for inviting us to be here. I am going to simply try to do in 10 minutes to try to introduce that to you, this study, that it exists. And although I'm not going to talk much about the solutions, I will talk about the problems, and I will try to define which are the problems that we deal with in this study that we conducted in MIT Energy Initiative with the collaboration of the University of Comillas in Madrid, which one of my colleagues on the Comillas side is sitting down there. So very quickly, which was the objective of the study? Well, the objective and the tools and the contributors I'm going to go very quickly, but the main idea is basically to examine, to look at which are the changes that are going to take place in the power systems all over the world that have to do mainly with the development of distributed energy resources. So looking at how the systems can change, the markets are going to have new agents, how there will be new business models, and focusing specifically in one particular thing, which is what do we need to do in the regulatory side and in the policy analysis side to really allow for the most efficient change. And as we will see later, this doesn't mean that we want to promote distributed generation at all. It's just simply being sure that whatever is the most efficient solution can be implemented and we don't develop inefficient solutions. So I'm going to go very quickly on the slides. The slide deck is much longer than what a 10-minute presentation allows. So what I want to do is I'm going to be jumping on slides. I hope that it will be available for all of you. And if it is not, please send me an email. I will be happy to share it with you. Anyway, so well, we had in this study a large research team and also a very relevant advisory committee, among them Manuel Sanchez Jimenez, who has been talking in the previous session from the European Commission, lots of companies that were interested in the study, the Department of Energy of the United States, independent system operators, utilities, oil companies. So we wanted to have a very big representation of stakeholders so that we could gather all the different views, manufacturers and things like that. Which is the scope, and very quickly I will go through the 4 parts of the study. The study is fully available in the MIT Energy Initiative webpage. It's basically divided in 4 parts. The first part is basically something that is about understanding how the distributed energy resources can change the power systems, how can change the market mechanisms, the market agents, which is the way in which they are going to interact, and which are the potential business and benefits, financial benefits from these new alternatives. And this is the first part. I will go very quickly into that. And then we face the main question, which is if the future is distributed. And our answer is very simple, is that we don't know. And we don't know if it's going to be distributed or not, but what we do know, it is that it's going to be integrated. So there will be small things and big things. We don't know in which proportion, but certainly they will be interacting all the time, and we need to develop the current market structures and the current designs of the network operators so that these different animals can really interact. So what did we do? Basically, what we did was looking at regulation and this market design, trying to get to a level playing field, so trying to develop the current regulations in place and in order to allow, as I said before, for this integration. Right? This is what we're looking for, a framework for an evolving electricity sector. And how do we do it? Basically, proposing 4 main working tasks. And one of them is that we need to develop cost-reflective prices and charges. We have been talking a lot about smart meters and how great they are, and 35 million here and there, and all these kind of things. This is awesome. But then we have to develop the regulations so that we do something useful with them. And this means that we need to develop the current tariffs that end users we are, according to which we are paying, so that we can take advantage of these smart meters in order to actually pay for the use of the networks that we do. So these tariffs have to be able to reflect the services that distributed generation can provide to the market agents, to the distributors, to the transmission owners, to the system operators. So we need to move from these very dumb, simple volumetric tariffs to something way more sophisticated, both of the energy and the access to the network side, the market fees, the network fees. So what we're saying is basically that, in a nutshell, these tariffs have to forget about what is behind the meter. So we just have to look at which is the actual profile of consumption of the different consumers, and in order to see if they're consuming a lot in the peak or not, and how this peak impacts on the location and occasional cost and value of each consumer or distributed generator. The second area in which we have been working on is in proposing new network regulation. This means basically changing the ways that distribution and distributors are being remunerated now. So obviously we are saying that all these new smart grids are great, that the new networks are going to be the vehicle for all this distributed generation, but we need to involve the distribution companies. I know this is a big issue here in India, to provide them with incentives so that they are willing to help into that task, and also so that these new things do not imply more costs than what they already have. And this is also one of the challenges that we claim that had to be faced. Another issue that is relevant and we have reflect about is the industry structure. So specifically in Europe and the United States, we are talking a lot about the market, and it has been mentioned before, about the market for the retail market, so how consumers can be actually being more active in the markets, selling flexibility to the network owners and to the market players. So we will have to be careful in looking at which are the relationships between the distribution system operator, the transmission system operator, the retailers, the aggregators, the energy service companies, and all these kind of things. This is a very vivid discussion in Europe, and so I'm not going to go more into that. And finally, the fourth big area of recommendation is how the current electricity markets, the day-ahead markets that we know, the intraday markets, the balancing markets, need to change in order to allow for larger amount of flexibility, more competition, and all these kind of things. And also, how do we have to redesign the renewable subsidies in such a way that they don't interact negatively with markets, because we consider that renewables are already adults and they can do things better than they have done it before in the markets. So very quickly, this is the second core. And finally, there is a last part that basically has to do with looking at the value of location when you have distribution. This is a map of the New York State in the United States. One thing that you can see is that if you look at the value of one distributed storage in the case of Rhode Island, which is that part of the state of New York, which is very congested, you can see that the value the locational value of this equipment is very relevant, because it is in a very saturated and congested place. And there are different reasons for that value: savings in energy transmission, savings in energy distribution, voltage control, distribution deferral, and others. While if you make the same analysis in the same state, but in the case of Mohawk, which is much a rural area, or not rural, but dispersed with less network constraints, the value of this distribution distributed asset is much lower. So there is a huge need to really provide market agents with right signals to place their distributed generation in the right places, because the value that we can unlock from this signal, these different equipments, is very relevant. So we cannot keep on dropping distributed generation no matter where, because we're losing lots of money. So finally, which is the conclusion of this valuation part that we have done there, is basically that first thing, the economies of scale still matter, so there are still costs on being small into that part, and also that the deployment of distributed resources is not always effective when you look at the savings in the distribution network. So finally, and I finish with this, so I can stick to the 10 minutes, I'm 1 minute overdue, is we are trying to basically send a quick message, which is that we all know, because we have been, I have been working in this sector for 20 years, that regulation usually always goes behind what actually happens. And particularly in this country, but in many others, there is still a chance of developing the regulation before things happen. So there is a huge potential from renewables here in India, and it would be, in our view, not only in India but everywhere else, instrumental that all these things that I've been quickly talking about, which is the role of the distribution system operators, the tariffs for end users, the market structures, if any, there's a chance to fix them before the wave comes, because what we know is that once the elephant is in the room, it's not very easy to take it out of it through the window. And the elephant is coming. It starts being very tiny, and it grows immensely. So this is basically the main message. Again, the study is available in the web page. We have not stopped here at MIT. We are going to keep on working on these topics going forward. There are lots of challenges that we want to develop, and of course, if you're interested in those topics, please don't hesitate to contact me. And with this, I'm done on time. Thank you, Matthias. Thank you.